Testing.
All right. Scared you. All right, I want to call to order the Finance Committee meeting, and I'm waiting for my board docs to come up alive, but with the change in the way we're doing things, we have an opportunity for public comment before we hit anything to the agenda item. Does any of the massive amount of public here have any public comment? No? Okay, so we're going to move along. My agenda's not popping up yet. I think that the general operating budget is first, Mr. Tracy?
That is correct. You want us to begin?
I'm good. Not yet. Oh, I'm sorry, the minutes from the last meeting. That's right, I'm trying to get the agenda to pop up here. The two members of our Finance Committee are here, Dr. Garrett and Dr. McVeigh. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Second, okay. Both of you in favor, as I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any opposed, abstentions? Good, well, the motion carries. So thanks for reminding me of that, and the minutes have been approved. Now we move to the general operating budget. I am not logging in. I'll pull up my phone.
No, Mark, it's not on. It's not on,
Yeah, the attachment, well, that's what I was trying to log in and see it. The
I should have told you sooner, but.
budget wasn't there.
There's no attachment.
There's no attachment.
Or,
Okay, here you go.
I should have told you.
That's what I was trying to log in and see if it was
yeah, just,
executive.
general operating is just a title. Go down to the next one, independent auditors report. and the independent auditors report has
That's why
the
there's no
attachment to it.
attachment. Okay.
So it is a,
I thought we actually had something on the general operating budget, which is why I was trying to log in and get the attachment, and it wasn't logging in. So let's move down to the independent auditors report.
all right, thank you, Mr. Finnegan. Joining us this evening, actually at the table, we have our independent auditor team from Barbicane Thornton. They should be familiar faces as they've presented to us over multiple years. We have Jeff Kowalczyk and Alex Frank here with us. I'm going to turn it over to you. We like to keep the term independent throughout the whole process because it is a review, an independent review of our financial operations, internal control, and ultimately our financial statements as well as our federal programs. So with that, I guess I'll be turning it over to Jeff.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for having us here. We're delighted to be here presenting the results of our audit of your financials for the year ended June 30, 2025. Before we go into it, and I'm going to have Alex do most of walking through the specific financial statements, there's two things I wanted to highlight. One, I often save for the end, but I would like to thank Mark and Christy and their team for providing all of the information we requested in a timely and thorough manner throughout our procedures. The other thing I do want to highlight is that often when we come to this meeting, we either have a final audit or we have a very close about to issue final. This year, there's one major difference that has made things a little tricky, and that is the federal government has not yet issued its annual compliance supplement, which is the guidebook for what the federal government requires us to look at to perform our federal single audit testing. This was always going to be a difficult year for them because there was new Yellow Book government auditing standards guidance that applied to a small amount of grants that are part of this year's annual cycle, none that impact your district, but some other governmental entities with June year ends have grants that are under the new yellow government auditing standards rules. So the compliance supplement has to have 2 full sets of rules this year. Normally it's issued in May or June. They said from the beginning, it's going to be a little late. There's some staffing shortages in OMB as well as that. So we always knew the target was October, and then October 1st hit and the government's closed. So to our knowledge, no further work has been done on the compliance supplement. Like I said, they sent a draft out in August, so we have done our testing, and we feel very confident that as long as nothing changes before the final when the final guidance is submitted, that nothing will change from this report. But by regulation, we can't finalize and issue our federal audit until the federal government has put out the guidance. It is possible, if that starts to create issues for other things like continuing disclosure rules or other elements, that we could bifurcate and separate out the reports. We're trying to avoid it because it does create additional cost to the district, because under our quality control standards, it has to go through 2 sets of reviews, and we have to create a secondary binder because we have document retention requirements, and it creates a lot of back-end work that we're trying to not have to charge anyone for, frankly. So the numbers in here should be the same as that are on our final report. The results should be the same that are on our final report. We're not in a position where we're able to issue that final report quite yet. But we will keep the district apprised when we hear anything more from OMB on the timing of that. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Alex to present the results of the audit.
Yeah, so as Jeff said, notwithstanding all of the compliance supplement things, we did our financial statement audit. We were on site, in end of August. We came out, we're at the district office with Christy and her team, looked at all of the supporting documentation that we requested. As Jeff said, Christy and her team were very helpful, timely getting us everything, always a pleasure. We perform these audits in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States, and as well government auditing standards, which falls under what Jeff was just talking about with the Yellow Book and single audit requirements. For the year 2025, I'm pleased to report we had a unmodified or clean audit opinion on the financial statements, as well as currently, if nothing changes, a unmodified and clean opinion on the single audit report. This year, for a single audit, we tested the Title I, and I have half the report here, so I need to, my printer ran out of paper when I was trying to print it up.
It was just Title I.
It was just Title I, so
Yeah.
Title I program. As I said, it was a clean, unmodified opinion on that program. We have no recommendations or findings related to that. Yeah. And then, I quickly wanted to touch on one big change this year, in addition to, as Jeff said, the compliance supplement. This year, the district was required to implement GASB 101. This requirement changes the presentation of compensated absence, or the calculation, sorry, of compensated absence liability for the district. This is something that I know Christy and her team went back and forth on for a couple months trying to figure out the best way to kind of tackle this. And the biggest change really is more of a conceptual change. In the past, compensated absence is usually I think of it as a tangible number. It was someone's sick or vacation time times their hourly rate gave you a liability to pay. They kind of tipped it all on its head and said, not guess, it's not the right word. Jeff probably has a better word than I do. But you're really going to look at an estimate of what these people are going to use over the course of their entire lifespan at the district and extrapolate out a dollar amount from that. It's a little more complex than that. I know I went back and forth with Chris, like I said, a decent amount trying to figure out the best way to handle it.
Yeah, if you think about a employee of the district, if they have 80 hours of accrued sick time, and let's say that at retirement, they would be paid out $20 per day. Historically, we would just say 80 days times 20 hours times whatever their, or times $20 per day, that's their compensated absence liability. Now we have to say, this person has 80 hours. An average district employee who has 80 hours will use 66 while they're still an employee of the district, will get paid out for 10 and will lose 4 because some employees leave without being eligible for payout because they leave either not voluntarily or without meeting various requirements. And then we have to, for the percentage that an average employee would use during their life, we have to multiply their current daily rate by that number of days. And for the percentage that they get paid out, we multiply by the $20, and then we do nothing, we just throw the lost ones aside. So it becomes sort of a 3-tiered calculation for each employee, even though, of course, each employee isn't going to both lose and get a retirement portion. But we can't guess which employees are going to stay through retirement and which ones are going to leave. So it became sort of an iterative process where there were sort of 3 rounds of calculations that arrive at a number that is the best guess of what has been earned by employees that will be paid out at some point for whether it's through retirement or through them using it in subsequent years. So you'll see that the compensated absence liability will jump because that portion that they're estimated to use that's paid at their daily or recorded at their daily rate is a much bigger number than a retirement payout.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
So yeah, like Jeff said, the net effect of this was a restatement of the 2024 liability of about $1.5 million, just under that.
And this is just entity-wide.
Yeah, just entity-wide.
And food service, so it doesn't affect your budgetary
Yep,
numbers.
exactly. It doesn't impact your general fund or your operating funds. You will see it on that face of the statement on your statement of net position on the full accrual level. So if you're looking at this year and last year and you're wondering why the numbers are different, that's why. So that's probably the biggest change for this year. Outside of that, the district's entity-wide net position increased about $15 million this year. A big portion of that is the ongoing construction, or the new construction, I should say, at the New Garden and Greenwood Elementary schools. Those really picked up steam this year, and I believe it was around $50 million of construction in progress was added this year. And the offset of that was the issuance of about $34.8 million of new debt to cover those costs. So that gets you to that 15-ish number. Also, the district had set aside about $750,000 to offset the increased debt service payments for next year, just with the timing of the maturities of certain bonds. There's a little reserve in there to pay off that increased debt service. Next, I want to just quickly touch on district's revenue for the year. I'm on, would it be PDF page, what's that, 16 probably? If you wanted to scroll down. I Googled out, I think the PDF page is 16, it'd be page 12 at the bottom of the page. I don't know which one you're gonna look at. Yeah, right there.
So yeah, 15.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, so I just quickly want to touch on some of those changes in revenue. You see total revenues increased about $3.5 million, or about 3.3. Majority of that was increases in taxes due to the increase in millage rate during the year. So total taxes are about $78 million, or 71% of that total revenue. And total revenue being $110 million for fiscal year 25. Other revenues maintained a relatively stable amount year over year. there's some decrease in your, oh, I realize there's a formatting weirdness here. Operating grants decreased a little bit. That comes from both federal funding and your state funding. Yeah. All in all, relatively similar. We saw some big decreases in your instruction expense also this year. It dropped about $9 million from 24 to 25. A big part of that is the current year changes from your actuarial reports for PSERS, OPEB, and pension plans. This year we saw a large decrease in the liability in that line, which then results in a decrease in the expense spent this year for those.
Isn't that something? They finally get better, and it makes it look like you're spending less on instruction.
Yeah.
Even though when you look at the fund level, you were in line with where your budget was.
It's great. Nothing like that to confuse people who are going to look at these. Let's see. If it's all on here, and let me.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, I was going to say, if the one thing I would probably draw attention to on the budgetary comparison schedule, I think that's always, when you're looking, you're like, where did we end up? What did we set out to do? What did we do? It's page 25 of the report, so probably page 28 on the PDF. And you'll see that for the year, your fund balance in the general fund decreased modestly, about $956,000. Sorry, so what, right there, page 25. Against a budget where you had budgeted even to stay with your fund balance ending where it started. But if you dig into that a little more, you'll see that the decrease in fund balance was actually because you made a transfer out into your capital projects fund to help support, or capital reserve fund, to support some of the long-term needs of the district. And were it not for that transfer, you were slightly above budget. And one of the big drivers in this is that your revenues, if you scroll up just a little further, actually came in ahead of budget. And this is really good to see, because this is the first year in a few years where we're starting to see more stabilization in revenues. For a few years, ESSER funding was causing a lot of districts to show vastly greater revenues than budgeted. And the high rate of returns on investments was also causing massive changes between budget and actual numbers. So this is the first year where we've seen a few districts get bit by that, where those numbers are coming down and they didn't have sufficient revenue to cover their expense needs. Your district continued to successfully leverage and gain enough revenue to support the expenditures of the district. And that's why you were able to make a transfer into the capital projects fund, capital reserve fund, again, excuse me, to support those longer term needs. So I did want to highlight that, because this is a year where these numbers probably look kind of familiar to the last few years because your districts had successful years revenue wise. This is the first year where that's not really been universal throughout. And that really speaks to your team identifying and ensuring that the revenue budget is sufficient for the expenditure needs that they know the district will need.
Turn it back.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say.
Perfect.
So, perfect. Then just quickly wanted to take, let me just double check that. No. That was pretty much all I was going to say. You just took it out of my, not out of my mouth, but said it better than, more concise than I would have.
Well, in that case, we'd love to open it up and hear what you're thinking, what your concerns are, what your questions are, or any additional information we can provide.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, every year we appreciate the work you do, and I get to talk to one of you for an interview. I'm not sure how I spoke to this year. And of course, all of the staff, you know, Mark and Christy and everyone else who went into putting things in, especially with the big change on trying to guess how much sick time someone's going to use. I mean, that's seems like it was better when it was an exact number, but you never know. A question, you had mentioned that due to the PSERS change, that it appears that our educational expenses have gone down. Now, Does that play in our favor when we calculate a per pupil cost for charter school tuitions?
Unfortunately, correct me if I'm wrong, Christy, but I believe that is calculated based on the budgetary basis. And Christy said that is correct, so unfortunately,
Doesn't help us.
it does not
Okay.
help us.
Anyone else have any questions out there? No, great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, as always, for having us out and for letting us serve your district.
Thank you. See you next year.
And I would just like to pile on. I'd like to thank Jeff and Alex. It is a great deal of comfort and certainly more efficient to have the two individuals that have worked with our district, that know our personnel, who know our accounting methodology, including our financial software system. So Caitlin Lester is here too from our accounting department. My hands are pretty much off throughout the audit with the exception of a few signatures. So thanks to Dr. Brady for pulling it off. I did want to point out page 23. I can tell you how accounting has evolved in school districts from 30 some years ago when I started, which is a modified accrual basis accounting. And what you're hearing them reference is a lot of GASB statements, which are making school district mere business entities. So before, we really didn't spend a lot of time looking at depreciation. We really didn't look what would happen if we shut down June 30th. And a lot of the things that have been introduced are really to take a look. If we shut down June 30th, what would we owe PSERS? So you hear these OPEB liabilities, because PSERS as a whole is underfunded. So PSERS sends us a big number, like $4 million, that we need to put a book entry to say that if we shut down, that liability is part of Kennett, as well as Westchester and Turner and Easttown and all the school districts that participate in PSERS. So that's a book entry that we're waiting for. Now you'll see it also with all the accruals for sick leave, vacation leave, some of the things that we're talking about. We also have an actuarial assessment that occurs every year to look at this, and that is another book entry. And the document that is up on the screen right now on page 23 of the audit is really where I can say I focus my immediate attention to. How much money is in the bank at the end of the year? And I think when it comes down to brass tacks, that's what our constituents want. That's what the board members want to know. What do we have in the bank today? Because that's how we develop our budget. When we're developing our budget for the next 8 months, we don't talk about sick leave, vacation leave, retirement liabilities. It's all, what are we going to spend between July 1st and June 30th? And how much money is going to be in the bank at the end? Are we going to have to borrow and do some tax revenue anticipation notes to kick off the year? Or are our reserves sufficient to carry us through? So when you look at this page, we're sitting just shy of 8% for our general operating undesignated unreserved fund balance. And that's why it's uncommitted. So we have 8.8 million sitting there. You really don't have to worry about the 50 million in the second column. That is our capital projects. If all goes according to plan with our 2 elementary schools, it should be a net zero. We know that's not going to happen. Hopefully we'll have a little surplus there, and we'll talk about how we're going to utilize that in the future. But that 50 million really is all targeted for our construction projects. The next line, the third column over, is our capital reserve. The 28 million is really somewhat undesignated, but it is committed to capital improvements, and that is outlined in our 5-year capital improvement plan. Now, our 5-year plan doesn't detail every last dollar of that 28. It is really a 5-year, what's on the horizon as far as major capital improvements, but that is that bucket. So if you're going to spend time looking or you really want to dive deep into it, I would say start at page 23, and then there's another page in here that really does a comparison of budget versus actual spend. That really gives you the performance indicators for a district, a little pulse to see the health of the district. All of the other pages in the notes and financial, we're going to leave up to the accountants. It is important that we have all this information. Jeff mentioned by the end of the year, for all of our bond holders, and there's a lot of them, we need to file all these documents and have them on record. If we do a bond issue, it's important to get this, unqualified audit opinion. So I want to thank them for their time once again. We look forward to their help and assistance throughout the year as they keep coming out with new regulations, and we can touch base with them to find out the best course of implementation. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. You're welcome to stay. You're welcome to leave, as always. We won't be offended.
Thank you.
I guess now we're going to move on to the RACP, and I just want to get into the activities of the Kennett Area School Authority.
It's just really an informational item. I think the board was made aware through an email. All of the deeds for all 4 properties have been filed with the Chester County Recorder's of Deeds Office. I did file with our RACP third-party administrator, the new deed for New Garden. So we'll wait to hear back from them whether that now satisfies that discrepancy for the $1.7 million RACP grant. Once I get official copies, we'll keep them in safekeeping in our district office safe. But everything has been filed, and hopefully that is behind us for good. I just left a copy of New Garden's deed on the agenda if you wanted to see what it looked like.
And that new formed authority lives for a year, or they disbanded already?
They are not disbanding. They will complete their term of 4 years.
Oh, 4 years?
Yes.
Okay.
They may never reconvene, but their term is a 4-year term.
Great. It's always nice to own our buildings. Moving on to the building allocations.
Building allocations, this document, many of you on the Finance Committee are very familiar with. It all starts down here at the very bottom, the per student allocation. This number represents the actual dollar value that we are investing in each child's instructional materials. It's 186. That was increased by the Act 1 index of 3.5 over last year. All right. Then what we do is take the enrollment projections. The enrollment projections were presented at the October Finance Committee meeting. So if you go back to your October minutes, you'll see a total anticipated or projected enrollment of 3,766. We populate each building. So the kindergarten center is 300, Bancroft 365, and so on. Elementary has a weighting factor of 1. That means they're going to get $186 for every student at 300 students. That drives out $56,000.61. Everyone also has student supplies. Back in COVID, we started furnishing each one of our elementary and the middle school with an allocation to provide students that cannot afford to bring in school supplies. We provide them with a line item so they can go ahead and purchase book bags, papers, pencils, crayons, glue, etc. And you'll see that in each one of our elementary schools, the kindergarten center, and the middle school. The final line item is not at the discretion of the building. We have a district-wide copier RFP that goes out about every 4 years. That is controlled by the district office, but it is charged back to the building. So this is a hard-coded number, this 15,000. You'll see it kind of escalates the bigger the building, the more copiers they have, but that is all controlled from the central district office. And we allocate money because we know what the lease is per each machine. When we hit some of the secondary schools, you start to see a differentiating in the cost. So the middle school is the first differentiating. 7th and 8th grade get an incentive. They get a 0.45 more on that $186 per kid. So it starts to generate more just because the consumable instructional materials as you go through the older grades is more expensive, and the high school gets 1.7 times that 186. So we have all these categories. The pathways, I need to change that title. Now that's future ready. Last year they had 40,000. It was also increased by the 3.5%. So everything that is included on this document has been increased by 3.5% with the exception of enrollment, because we have a decreasing enrollment. When you look at all the numbers it generates, our overall percentage increase is only 0.9. That's because we have less anticipated students next year than we have this year. So our appropriation increase is a very minimal $9,801. And certainly as you sit there and look at this dollar figure, it does not include all of the curriculum technology. When we started adding the various departments, we started pulling the numbers out of the building's discretion and putting them in departments. So we have Mr. McGuire's department buying all the sustainable 101 devices. When we look at the curriculum department, they're buying curriculum materials K-12 through our curriculum mapping and the cycles. So a lot of that has been pulled away. When Dr. Barber was the principal at the high school, he can attest, we had years where I think the high school was up 700,000, and we started pulling components out to let them be managed from a more central district perspective and less from a building perspective. Each one of the buildings handles the allocations a little bit differently. Elementaries typically control it from the principal level. As you get through the secondary, it starts breaking up between grade levels and department levels. The high school probably has the most differentiated allocation because they spread it out to multiple departments throughout their building. They all have access to report writers that Dr. Brady sets up in our system. So any day they can pull their reports. It'll equal this number that you see on the schedule, and they know where they stand at any time during the course of the year, including encumbrances. So as soon as they issue a purchase order, that dollar figure is encumbered against that account. So the high school may have these funds spread across ELA, math, science, and it's broken down into many different categories, but they can see every one of these line items. And certainly if they have any questions as they go, they just call Dr. Brady or Caitlin Lester, and they have it at their fingertips and disposal. Okay.
Any questions on allocations?
Just, Mark, just refresh my memory. So the schools cannot carry over unspent money, correct?
That is correct. There's a few separate categories that they can. There's some principal accounts where they have raised money internally. Those accounts will run. We have the WIN program at the high school. That does, but the dollars that we're talking about this evening do not.
So it's to their advantage to spend their
Yes, it's to
allocation?
their advantage to spend down, and they'll start really checking the pulse. We call it March Madness, where they'll really
Right.
start seeing how much money they have to buy
Right.
curriculum materials. There is a penalty if they overexpend, it gets taken out of the next year's allocation, so if they
Okay,
spend too much.
so they have to keep an eye out, but it is, again, to
They
their
do.
advantage to spend it out. Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, then we're going to move along to debt service.
And finally, for this evening, we have our debt service schedules. Well, there's not a lot of information to share this evening. I think it's very positive news. Last year, we did complete the fourth and final phase of our elementary school borrowing. So what we're presenting tonight will be really locked in until such time as this board either refinances one of its outstanding bonds or issues new debt. So for the next several years, we cannot refinance because call dates, as they're known on our bonds, you can set call dates at 5, 10 years. We won't hit any of those call dates. So the opportunity for refinancing won't occur for several more years associated with any one of the 4 borrowings we did for the elementary school. We are at, and we are a little below our budget number. So all along, we've been promoting that the new elementary schools will not cause the district to raise taxes to fund them, at least the construction of them. And that is the case. Actually, we've reduced a significant amount of money from our debt service line item last year, and we're going to be pulling some more debt since now we actually have the number, and just think of it as a fixed rate mortgage. With the exception of there's no escrow taxes, because as you know, your escrow can go up and your mortgage will go up. However, ours are tax-free. Therefore, when we're going to state at 7.6 million, it will stay at 7.6 million. We've negated the spikes. The auditor spoke to the 750,000 that we actually included in our budget. It's this year, 25, 26. There are no more spikes. You have a level debt, and we're going to see that. This is the various bond issues that are outstanding. The 18 will go away, and then you're just going to be left with these 4 bond issues, and these are all to finance the 2 elementary schools. All right, you can see that we're at 7.6 million. We do have bank fees, and they actually are the ones that keep track and pay our notes. We have, every one of our bond issues has 2 payments per year. One is just principal, and one is a mix of principal and interest. So you can see these payments going out. What is more important, when you look at our long-term debt, and all of these schedules, when we produce our budget booklet, are included. So all this information's out there. This is the 4. Remember, here's our last payment. You can see that this is the last payment associated with bankrupt elementary school. It's coming off this year. However, our debt over here in the last column doesn't drop, and that's called a wraparound schedule. This was all built into our financing schedule. So one of the other issues goes up, and here it is, goes from 2.8 to 3.2. It's going to equal this 622,000, but our debt will now sit at 7.6 million all the way through, and then we just start consolidating our schedule. But if you went out here, all these years until the debt starts falling off in 2045 will be 7.6 million. Everybody following? So our debt for the elementary schools has been set aside. It's fully funded. There's no need to raise any debt for next year associated with these projects. We do have a decreasing revenue. We'll talk about that when we get to the revenue schedules in January. The state used to participate and offset some of our debt service schedule. That is why you have been going through that very lengthy plan con process. Now, I can tell you historically, you got anywhere between 8 cents to 5 cents, more so on the 5 cents for all of your debt, your issuance. But 5 cents on $8 million adds up. We were seeing about $500,000 come through in state subsidy. That has been decreasing steadily. When you make that last payment of $622, we will cease to receive any money from the state to offset the debt. So the state is no longer a partner when it comes to construction in Kennett. All right, so anything moving forward, this board can anticipate 100% of construction or renovation will be borne by the district. Prior to this, every 20 years, your buildings were eligible for state reimbursement for significant renovations or new construction. But that now has since passed. All right, so we're in very good shape. This is a lot of money when it comes. When I was up at a conference just 2 weeks ago, we sit at about 7%, just think, we're 7.6 on 100 million. We're about 7%. That's a really good number to be. There are districts that are 11, 12% on the high end of debt. So we're not at our debt capacity. There's a formula in our bond issue resolutions that this board approved that speak to what we calculate. You could borrow more, it's just you would have to fund it. You'd have to take that 7.6 and go to 8.6. And there are districts that are 11%, 12%, but that's the heavy districts. There are districts that are very low debt. They're at 3%, 2%. But I also caution you, now we're not going to have to worry about that for the foreseeable future, but if you remove debt and you don't backfill it, you can't make it up through the normal Act 1 index. You're going to need to go out for a referendum. And that has been proven very difficult even in the state of Pennsylvania, even in districts that have very, quality educational programs. So just be mindful of that. If we do refinance, you may say, oh, look, we've refinanced, we dropped 7.6 to 7. Really that 7% should be consistent with the budget growth. We should go from 7%, if our budget's 150, we should still be at 7%, which would require you to have, almost 9 million in that category. So a lot of districts are getting caught because they haven't raised that debt as their budget grows, even if you just cushion this every year with a little bit extra every year so that it equates to the cost of the new buildings. It's a strategy. I know it's hard because you want to, you've got a lot of other expenses, a lot of other priorities, but if this number stays stagnant for the next 20 years, Kennett would find themselves in a position where it'd be very difficult to fund a new building because that 7.6 isn't going to buy you what it bought you today. So it's just one of those things that I just want everybody to keep in their head. And if I was going to be here for another 20 years, I'd be reminding you that it would probably be financially sound to just start adding 50 to 100,000 to your debt every year so that when the case comes that you need to build something, you have that capacity. Just food for thought. But we are in excellent shape. I got to say, the strategy that this board endorsed about 5 years ago for debt worked pretty flawlessly throughout. So thank you for your support. I know it was a leap of faith as we started staging in all that debt because we would have been debt-free in 26, 27.
Great, thank you.
I do have 2 other items I just wanted to mention quickly. Today, we did hold the pre-bid furniture meeting for the new schools at the Chester County Intermediate Unit. Remember, we hired in Bob Brazel as our furniture and moving logistics coordinator. He's been working with our 2 building principals and all of the staff surveying on everything from student chairs and desks to kiosks. We have all that information. That is in the hands of the IU. They have built elaborate spreadsheets, and we are on the market right now. So we're actually advertised public bid. We had the pre-bid meeting. There were 14 companies represented at the pre-bid meeting, along with Bob Brazel and Jason from the IU. So they were very excited about that. Jason actually said that's more than any other bid that he's had attend one of the pre-bid meetings. Bid opening is November 14th, so next Friday. We'll have the bid opening. It will include all of the furnishings for the classrooms, but does not include office furniture and special areas. It just doesn't make sense to take 2 art rooms and bid it. When you're looking at 1,600 student desks, it makes sense to do that. So the one thing we haven't selected yet is the color. So we are bidding the product or an equivalent. Once we get those in hand, then we'll turn it over to our architects and team to really take a look at the color selections. But 2 different delivery staging. I mean, they're going to do all the delivery, all the setup in the classrooms. So that's all included. So basically a turnkey operation for furniture. If anybody wants to see the furniture, let me know. We can have samples brought in. Some of the samples are still, I think Dr. Garrett has seen them over at New Garden, but we are in the process. So looks like, I think we have an April delivery for New Garden and a late June, early July for New Garden. I'm sorry, for Greenwood. I think I had one other thing to mention. Where's my agenda? Oh, we had our medical rate renewal. So Chris Marcel, I think she's here, there you are. We sat down with the Ruschini Group to go over our medical and prescription renewals for the year. This is our first look. We'll be using that first look as we start developing our employee salary and benefits schedules, which is scheduled for next month. Remember, we are December 8th. The first is the reorg meeting. December 8th, we're going to cover a lot of information because we are rolling over all of our categories for employees through their collective bargaining agreements, their Act 93 agreements, and employment contracts, along with these rate increases for medical benefits. We had overall a fairly favorable review. Remember, there's a lot of trending right now because they're forecasting rates that start July 1st of 26. So we do expect these will come down, barring any catastrophic loss. Medical was in at 4.53%, and prescription was at 9.16%. So a rough aggregate of about 5.2%, which in today's age of medical cost, some of the districts are still experiencing 18 to 20%. So we're looking good. So our benefits stay uniform this year. We did have a 1% additional contribution this year for all employees. So they're up to 15% or 14? Yeah, 15%. So that stays the same for next year. And that's all I had for this evening.
Very good. Does anyone have any questions on anything finance?
Can I go back to the building allocations?
Sure.
And looking at the high school, I just want to make sure I understand. So in addition to the student allocations, we're allocating separate amounts to pathways into graduation?
That is absolutely correct. Pathways was brought in as part of our strategic plan, the last go-around. The high school, when they were trying to implement some of the programs, there was significant startup costs associated with that. So we started off with a seed funding of $40,000. I know Dean Ivor is working hard to continue that program, so we keep them as a separate line item. Same thing with graduation. Graduation, and I know Dr. Mr. Saunders is really trying to get us to pinpoint and get more clarity on some of our expenses. I'd be the first one to tell you, in a $100 million budget, a lot of things are not defined down to the level where I can easily explain them. And so we're looking very difficult at payroll vouchers is one of them. But graduation expense was coming up, and every year it's repetitive. It's, you know, we have individuals for decorations, we have the sound support. There's a lot of cost associated with it without moving it off campus. And this gives them a bucket to work within.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure if this is a finance committee or curriculum committee or other item, but I would like to propose that we get an update on the Pathways program at some point.
Curriculum.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
after the holidays,
yep,
January, February, we could squeeze it in.
yeah, okay,
Okay.
thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you.
Any other questions? No questions from the public. So without, no further business, no new business, we covered everything. So we are adjourned.